Welcome back everyone. I said on Saturday I would be back on Monday for another dye demonstration, so if you weren't here on Saturday, I will introduce myself very quickly. My name is Sonia. I own Bellwether Yarns, which is a small yarn and fibre business located in West Yorkshire in Leeds, where I dye both yarn and fibre in my dedicated dye studio. So on Saturday we did a dip dyeing demonstration where I had a big pot of water, put some dye in, and then if you were here you will have seen me kind of dip dyeing the yarn in and out, and we ended up with sort of a fade skein, and I'll show you the results of that later. For the craft market that's been very kindly arranged by Cottage cards, I said I'd do a couple of dye demonstrations, so I'm back today. And we're going to do two things. One of them is to dye this yarn. So there's 3 skeins of 100 grams sock yarn in there, and that's a 80% blue-faced Leicester and 20% nylon base, which I really like working with. And you can see these are those hotel pants, and they are the narrow ones. I think they're about 10 centimeters deep. They sort of comfortably fit 3 skeins, I think. On the fibre front, if I just take you over there, that whole pan is taken up by 100 grams of fibre. All of this has been pre-soaked. I've started adding a little bit of heat just to help with absorption of water. And I do apologise again, my camera setup is not the best here in the studio, so I'm kind of on my mobile phone and I haven't really managed to figure out how to make sure that you can see me at the same time, or kind of move it around to the extent that you can see both me and then the fibre without me actually probably making you feel dizzy. So I'm going to put my camera down and we're going to dye this yarn first, I think. There we go. Oh dear, you're nearly falling over on me now. I'm hoping that I can edit some of these bits out later. So, as I said on Saturday, safety first. I'm wearing gloves for everything. Oh, there's just a little bit of heat coming through. I'm wearing gloves to protect my hands, obviously. I have all my dye is in stock solution, so I don't have to wear a mask to worry about inhaling really small particles of that. And apart from that, what I want to say as always is, if you're dyeing yarn with any type of acid dyes, which are there are food dyes that you can use which will also need acid to set the dye, but if you're using kind of commercial acid dyes specifically for yarn dyeing, then you must use dedicated equipment. So all the pots, pans, all the equipment I'm using has never been in my kitchen, will never be in my kitchen. It's completely dye dedicated. And then, as I said, we're doing this first, and in this I'm going to do I want to recreate, I'm going to let you in my secret here. Well, it's not really a secret, but I want to recreate. A lot of my dyeing is very visual, so I see something and I'm thinking I can represent that in yarn. And I'm working on kind of a Leeds kind of cityscape series at the moment, so this is very much a sample for that. I want to dye the Yorkshire Rose, the flag of the Yorkshire Rose, and if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a blue background with the white rose, yellow centre, little green leaves sort of dotted around. I think there's 4 or 6 maybe. But I've already dyed up yellow and blue, because yellow plus blue will give us green, and if any, I want the tiniest bit of green in there. I didn't want to kind of specifically add green dye to this. So we're going to see how it goes. I have dyed up, I have mixed up some yellow dye and I've measured this out quite carefully. There's 30 milliliters of a 1% stock solution in there, and if you have any questions about that, how you calculate or how you measure out dyes and that sort of thing, do let me know. There's some fantastic YouTubers out there who, you know, who do all the calculations for you and go through that. I don't have to reinvent the wheel, but I can just link you to those channels. So I have 30 milliliters of yellow made up to 150 milliliters liquid with water, and then I have 50 milliliter of blue made up also to 150 milliliters of water. I'm just trying to think. I've got this written down because if I'm doing repeatable colorways I have this written down. What I can't remember right now without going to get my book is whether I made this up to 150 or 100. I can probably just measure this. It's 150. There we go. Mystery solved. So the yarn has been soaking and it's just starting to warm up a little bit. There isn't an awful lot of water here because I kind of want the dye to more or less stay where I pour it. So I'm going to try and pour it really into the edge and then allow it to run down. And this is just the nature of it. The more water you have in there, the more it will flow. Sometimes what you can do is you can create a little bit of a dam. And that can actually help you with stopping the fibre, with stopping the dye running too far. That's a really, yeah, so we shall see how it goes. So I'm going to start pouring and we'll see how far we go. This is just starting to come up to temperature. I didn't want this hot, which is what we did in the video on Saturday, because on Saturday I wanted the colour to strike straight away. This time I want to give the dye a chance to kind of move around a little bit before it strikes and sets. So I'm going to try and pour from this side, which just feels a little bit unnatural to me. I would usually pour from this side, but then you won't be really able to see much. So I'm going to carefully, she says carefully, I'm going to pour that in here. And I'm just going to, and you can already see some of the yellow is already down here. There we go. Number one. And then I'm going to take the blue, give that a little swirl. That is a very bright yellow. I mean, the dye is called bright yellow, so that's fully what I expected. And we're just going to do the same with the blue at this other end. Now, I haven't added an awful lot of water there on purpose because, and this is why you want to wear gloves when you do this, because I can now go in, just manipulate this a little bit, and I can have a look, you know, what happens underneath, and you can see there's lots of white spots. So I'm just gonna try and make sure to open this all up. So I mean, I like kind of some variegation, some white spots. I do quite like that, but I also wanted blue at the bottom, so that looks much better. That will absorb that. And then I'm going to do the same with the yellow, and you can see by just limiting the amount of water, it has spread pretty much to this halfway point where I've created that little ridge, so that's actually working. And then I'm just going to do the same over here. Now, if you're dipping your hands, even though they're in gloves, if you're dipping your hands into the dye, you don't want to be dipping them into one and then into the next, because you will be carrying dye over. That can't always be kind of avoided, but it might not be kind of the look you're trying to achieve. So I'm wearing a dyeing apron. I did treat myself to a nice little linen apron a little while ago, so I can just wipe my hands on that. Really, I should have a towel or something next to me. That's the reality. So yes, this looks quite nice, and maybe I will just do a little bit of, because I did want a little bit of green, you know. I did kind of say there are some leaves, so I'm just gonna mix that up a little bit, just to add a little bit of interest. And then this pan is basically done, and I need to put the lid on, but I've put the lid, very convenient, right at the other side of the studio, so I get it later. It's on a low heat, nothing's going to happen. So yes, you can see that nicely on camera. Yeah, I think that's going to look nice. So I'm going to swivel you around to my fibre. There we go. Can you see that? So hello everyone, I'm back with my rescued polwa. So what you might notice is that this is in a different pan now. So I had all those little leftover bits of dye, and as I started to apply them, I kind of thought this is not going to work. And this is, you know, there is one thing having fun playing with colours, and then there is pouring it in and just realising that it's just not going to work. Now, I have to admit that the challenge with dyeing fibre is it looks so very different in its kind of wet state when the dye is in there to when you have it dried and fluffed up and put into a nice braid. And they always amaze me. So I still think the one I have done, and I have done it with the, or I have used up all those little leftover bits of dye, but the colours just didn't look very pleasing on video. And I think it would have put you off trying to dye fibre or to try having a go at it. So that will be rescued, don't worry. It might even, and this is the problem, and I'm a bit funny and say if I don't like something, I mean, I always try to kind of push ahead and kind of finish that specific task at the time, but sometimes the real challenge is knowing when to stop. Now if it comes out kind of completely unusable, I can just completely over dye it in a different colour. Obviously it's going to have like tonal undertones, but it will still be fine. It's not going to go to waste or anything. But just for the purpose of the dye demonstration, I just didn't like it, was the bottom line of that. So we have polwa fibre back in here, and excuse me a second while I run and get some dye. So now, funnily enough, this is what happens. I have these old jam jars, and it tells me that it's like sort of an aqua blue. That tells me it's a sky blue, but that colour just looks purple to me. And this is what happens often when I have these like little amounts. I don't label stuff up properly, because they're just quite often they are kind of custom dyed, kind of custom mixed up. They are often not the pure shade. So anyway, it is what it is, and I think I'm gonna fill this up with a bit of water and just use that up for starters. Just trying to think if I can remember what I may have used this for, but I genuinely can't. Now there is quite a lot of water in this much deeper pan. I have removed some of it, but there is quite a bit left. So I'm going to be very careful with the amount of water or extra kind of liquid I'm going to add. So I'm going to pour this in first of all. from one end. There we go. And the other colour I want to add in is this. I've got this vermilion, and I have to say I don't really use it much, so I'm going to pour that into that little jar, so I can, oh dear, so that I can rinse this out a little bit. And then pour this into that jar. And we will add just a tiny little bit of water. Again, I just don't want it to run like mad, and I'm just going to pour that at this end. I'm just going to give this another rinse. Actually, I'm going to leave that because can you maybe see that there are some sediments in there? So I'm going to leave them in there, and actually I can see that some have kind of landed on this fibre, so I'm just going to nip them out. They would probably kind of melt down as the fibre heats up, but not really worth kind of taking the risk. Just giving my gloves a bit of a rinse there. So we have this vermilion in one corner, and we will just let that do its thing and kind of not disturb that too much. I'll lift it up a little bit so that the fibre can, that the dye can run a little bit, and then at the bottom we will have this kind of purple colour, and in the middle we'll end up with a bit of white left. There, I'm much happier with that. Or much happier to show you this on camera anyway, compared to that mishmash of colour we had before. So I can see there's no colour transfer here, so I'm happy to carry on down here a bit and do the same thing, just lifting that out a bit, letting the dye. Now with fibre, so yarn you can kind of pick up and kind of flip in the pan. I have to say I don't like doing that to fibre, so if I can I will always avoid doing that, just because, you know, it's a much more raw product and therefore much more likely to feld, you know, which is the last thing we want really. So I'm going to just give you a quick look of this in all its glory, and I will be back in maybe half an hour to give you a peek under the lid. So I'm back with a quick look under the lids, and as anticipated, this is actually starting to grow on me. This was that first dye job that I didn't kind of show you on camera in the end, because when the colours went on I just didn't really like it. Now there's still a lot of green dye left in here, so that may kind of over dye some of this, so I think overall we'll get a kind of quite a nice braid out of that when that's done. But then under here is the purple and vermilion. That's looking really nice. Let me just put that lid down. Doing things one-handed now. Again, there's still quite a lot of dye in there, so I expect that to travel down further into this white section that we're still seeing at the bottom. And then right at the end we have our Yorkshire rose yarn. Oh dear, hang on a second. Get that lid out of the way. Now, what we can already see here is that the dye has more or less been completely absorbed, so the water is pretty much clear under there. So I'm going to leave all the lids on and let it do its thing, go home for lunch and come back when this is all cooled down and when it's dried, and I'll be able to show you the results.